most honest to thank the fantastic organizers. So we'd like to invite you to join us in a round of applause for Elvira and the Mumble Group. All right, so can everyone see our screen? Yep. It's okay? Yep. Okay. Excellent.
Yes. So Hongyu, again, you don't see us, right? So in case
I don't see you because I'm just using the browser function.
Yeah. So in case I need to tell you, I just switch the microphone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
good.
yeah. Go ahead. All right. So we're going to talk about the significance of expression today, and the frame within which we're thinking about expression is that we want to push the idea that expression gives us a different window on mindedness. So if you think about the basic forms of mindedness, people often look at two different pictures. The first is from the input side. So someone like Burge, for example, has emphasized this aspect of perceptual objectivity as the beginnings of mind. So one basic picture of mind is as a distinctive kind of input system of sorts that can take in the world in a special way. The other picture of mind that we often see is from the output side, from agency. So there are different accounts which have emphasized the agentive aspect, this output aspect. For example, Susan Hurley, Elva Noe, or you could even think someone like Kant in a way. So these are two basic pictures of mind. And the question is, are these the only two basic pictures of mind, basic forms of mindedness that we find? And we want to say no. How about expression? And that's why we want to consider the significance of expression. So we're going to talk through a preliminary understanding of expression, and then we'll look at various cases of expression, cases that might be or might not be expression. And then on the basis of that, we will argue that expression is a basic form of mindedness, not reducible to perception or action. And on that basis, we will then look at different marks of expression in order to go through different conditions to generate a kind of sketch of an account of what expression is and how it's a distinctive form of mind. Once we have that, we will compare our account with other major accounts, and then we will end by summing up how expression is effective and social, and therefore why it introduces a new basic form of mindedness. So what is expression? Now, intuitively, expression is the idea of the revelation of the inner state of a subject. And in these two pictures, you see cases of this kind of intuitive idea of the revelation of the inner state. So on the right side, you see a kind of a natural Duchenne smile, which is the smile of enjoyment or a natural smile of happiness. On the left side, you see a child crying. And in both cases, this idea is that expression is a window on the inner life of a subject. And today we'll keep our scope to the case of bodily expressions. So there are other cases of expressions, such as linguistic expressions and so on, but we will focus on what we take to be the central case, bodily expressions. And if someone wants to ask us about this, we can discuss the possibility of extensions to linguistic expressions in the questions. Today, we will argue that expression is a distinctive form of mindedness that is both effective and social. So now we turn to cases of expression.
Okay, so to start us off, let me introduce some further examples of bodily expression. Can you go to the next slide? Okay. So in the header, I put cases of expression or not, because I'm actually going to present 3 different categories of cases. And the first category contain cases where we would presumably all intuitively agree that these are cases of bodily expression. The second category are borderline cases where we have some intuitions pulling in the direction that they are expressive, that these phenomena are expressive, and other intuitions pulling in the opposite direction. And the final category are cases that share some similarities with phenomena of bodily expression, but cases where we would presumably all agree that they are not actual cases of expression. So the first picture you see here is the smile. And the subject in the picture is Paul Ekman. He's himself a prominent psychologist and somebody who has researched facial expressions quite extensively. And actually, what we see here are two kinds of smile. On the left, you see the natural smile, also called Duchenne smile, after the French neurologist and physiologist Duchenne. And on the right, you see the intentional smile. And so we're presuming here that both of these are expressions or revelations of an inner state, such as joy or exuberance. And on the left, with regard to the natural smile, you see that this involves the muscles of the eyes as well as the mouth, and the intentional smile only involves the muscles of the mouth. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is a clear case where what is expressed is a state of sadness or frustration, disappointment. And what we see here is somebody who's shedding tears, or weeping, and we want to consider that as a revelation, a case where an inner state of sadness or frustration is being revealed through these tears. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is again a clear case of a phenomenon of bodily expression. We see an angry face with all the typical expressions of anger, scowling, frowning, the kind of intense staring. And we want to consider this as a case where anger is being expressed in the face. Okay, next slide. Okay, now we come to the category of borderline cases. And this is supposed to be an exemplification of blushing from shame. Now, it's quite interesting that it's very difficult to find photographs of people who are blushing. I suppose that's because it's a very fleeting expression. And what's also interesting, though, is that most people who blush, most of the time when people blush, they also touch their face. So we see that here quite obviously. But this is supposed to be an illustration of someone who's blushing from shame. And as I said, here it's not completely clear whether we really want to say this is a case of expression. Why that is so is going to be discussed further on. So in general, all of these examples here are now just presented and introduced, and most of them will be discussed in more detail later on in the talk. Okay, next slide, please. This is a slightly graphic picture. So this is supposed to be a case where somebody is anxious and is sweating from anxiety. So there's some kind of, so the sweating is a result of them being anxious. And again, this is a case where it's not clear whether we would really want to say that this is a case of expression. Okay, so it's a borderline case. Next slide. So this is a bit how I feel at the moment because it's super hot over here in Germany. And we've now reached the category of the cases that share some similarities with expressive phenomena, but that are presumably not to be considered cases of expression. So here we have somebody who's sweating just because they're very hot. Okay, next slide. And finally, also a case where we probably all agree that this is not a case of expression. Somebody is shivering from cold in this picture. Okay. I think we can go to the next slide. So now we move on to one of our central claims, namely the idea that expression is a basic form of mindedness. And so when we now look at all of these examples, and specifically those that are in the good category, the category where it's quite clear that they are cases of expression, we want to raise the question, what makes these cases of expression? And we already offered this intuitive description according to which expression involves something like the revealing of one's inner life. And presumably one would have to add here, at least for conspecifics, because presumably we wouldn't want to say that this revelation, or this revealing, has to be understood by all and every subject, but at least for those who belong to the same species. So that's the intuitive description, but I think it's also clear that we need to specify this description a bit further, because at least some of the cases that we just looked at and that were borderline cases could also perhaps intuitively be described by this phrase. So we need to look further into what we mean by revealing one's inner life.
Indeed. So what we need now is to use this intuitive description and this range of cases to try to think about expression as a basic form of mindedness and what the marks of expression are. So why is expression a basic form of mindedness? And remember at the beginning, we began with this idea of this contrast between two basic forms of mindedness, this input side in terms of perception and the output side in terms of agency. And now we're going to argue that we should add expression as a basic form of mindedness. And the claim here is that expression is irreducible to perception and also to agency. So I'm going to take each claim in turn. Now, is expression reducible to perception? So although expression involves perception, it is more on the output side of mind rather than the input, as the cases have shown. So it's always displaying something, behaving in a certain kind of way, okay, rather than taking in information, as it were. So expression can involve perception because you can be expressing, say, disgust in response to some kind of perception of a disgusting object. But it's on the output side of mind rather than the input side intuitively. Furthermore, expression isn't perception of something in the mind. Okay, it's not itself a kind of introspective capacity. Rather, it's a way of revealing one's state of mind. So it's a kind of on the output side. So it's intuitively not reducible to perception. Okay. Now, if we look at the other claim, then is it the type of basic form of mindedness that is like agency? So if we are on track so far, expression is on the output side of mind. And then the question is whether actions or agency is the only kind of category of mindedness that is on the output side. So our claim is that actions are not the only outputs. And this is because they're expressive behaviors which are not agentive. So Julia has already mentioned this in some of the cases. So in particular, one important case we will be looking at throughout this talk will be the case of natural smiling as opposed to intentional smiling. So natural smiling is this kind of smile that you have when you have an involuntary response of pleasure to something that you're happy about. Okay. Now, when you think of the case of natural smiling, then more can be said, but just on the looking at it from the point of view of action theory and also the science of smiling, there are two ways smiling happens. In the intentional case, you have willful control of muscles around the mouth, and you try to smile. And on the involuntary case, when you have the natural or Duchenne smile, you have a series of different muscles controlled, including the eyes and also the mouth, which is run through a subcortical neural network. So it's a different kind of network from the voluntary smile. Okay, and the natural smile case is involuntary and also typically not considered an action. Okay, we'll go into this in more detail. So against the idea that expression is reducible to agency, I will take, we'll argue that expression is not intentional and also that expression is not necessarily agentive. I'm going to take each claim in turn. So against expression as intentional. So as it happens, this is an account that is important in the historical literature and comes from Wong. And Wong says that because this notion of correspondence or physiognomic appropriateness is unworkable in an account of expression because it's impossible to specify what kinds of behavioral expressions would have to physiognomically correspond with the internal states of mind. He proposes that the solution is that expressions are always intentional. So all expressive acts are intentional acts. And if they are intentional under that and a description of expressing, then it's a case of expression. Okay, so this is Wollheim's account. Our reply is that expression doesn't require intention. So intuitively, there are expressive behaviors which are not intentional actions and not even action. So for example, the case of the natural or Duchenne smile, which we have mentioned. So this seems to be an intuitive case of an expressive behavior, expressive of one's pleasure and enjoyment in some kind of pleasurable event, which is involuntary, but also intuitively expressive. Now, why do we think that the natural Duchenne smile is not an action? So I gave you a scientific reason already, that it's controlled by a subcortical circuit, different from the kind of standard motor cortex circuit for the control of muscular skeletal behaviors. And from a action theoretic point of view, often one can be unaware of expressive behaviors one is performing. So you might be unaware that you're performing a natural or Duchenne smile. Now, if you use Anscombe's why question criteria for when you have a rational or intentional action, if you are unaware of doing something, then Anscombe says the why question is denied application. If the why question is denied application, then the behavior cannot be intentional under any description. The thought is that here intuitively, then it's not an agentive behavior, certainly not a rational action. Okay, so this is the first, against expression as intentional. Second, against expression as necessarily agentive. Here we're also looking at the case of natural smile. So a key criteria for agency is this idea that for a capacity that is agentive, we typically have the ability to voluntarily initiate, control, and inhibit this capacity, okay? And this is not always possible for all expressive behavior. So for example, natural smiles. I mean, if you're not aware of it, then you can't inhibit it. You also cannot voluntarily initiate it. So even though there are expressive behaviors which are agentive, such as intentional smiling, there are also expressive behaviors which are not agentive, such as natural smiling. Therefore, we cannot say that expression is necessarily agentive. At this point, we have argued that expression is irreducible to perception and also to agency. Therefore, expression is a different basic form of mindedness. And now we come to the idea of what constitutes expression.
Then we simply look at all cases, but let's look at just one case, which is smile. When we look at natural and intentional smile, then we can find something which is more than what we know until now. We have kind of a basic structure. In order to reveal one's inner state, we have to have something who reveals and something who receives it. So we have a signaler and the receiver. But in order to have that, it has to have something like a correlation between the behavior and the mental state. So if we don't have any correlation between the behavior and the mental state, if it's random, if I just smile sometimes, and sometimes I am happy, but they are not overlapped in some interesting way, then it won't fly. So we have to have something like a reliable correlation. behavior B is reliably correlated with the occurrence of a kind of mental state in the subject whose behavior B is. So I have to, the natural smile have to appear when I am happy. Obviously, you might think, oh, but intentional sign. But you have to be careful, because when you use something which is revealing one's mental state, if you always use it when the happiness is not present, then it won't reveal anything. So some kind of correlation with some sort of reliability is always needed. Oh, but we have counterexamples. It is not sufficient to characterize what is expression, because we have a change of blood pressure from anger, or the skin conductance from anxiety. When you are anxious, your skin conductance will change, but nobody will know that. The change of blood pressure from anger will change. Nobody will receive that. So that's not good. Expression reveals the mental state to the receiver. So this requires that the receiver is able to receive and read it. What is missing in the counterexamples is that a reliable correlated behavior has to be such that it has to be readable for a conspecific receiver. If it's not readable, cannot reveal any inner state. So we need something which is reliability based on reliable perceptible correlation. Obviously, you remember from the beginning that at least for conspecifics, at least for the same kind of creature. So for humans, if it's a human smile, but a dog will understand it. We will come back to that. So we will use something from understanding actually expressions in animal cognition, and we use the examples to kind of find exactly what is expression, because we think that the expression is under described. A behavior, we think it has to be readable. And you remember, it has to be readable. Suppose you have a blood pressure change from being anxious, that is not readable, it cannot be an expression. So a behavior is readable. It has to be readable if it's an expression of something. If its meaning can be deciphered, at least for a conspecifics. But we speak about mental states, so what we need is that the behavior reveals one mental state, at least for conspecifics. Okay, you remember, we need readability, because if nobody can read it, then we wouldn't have a receiver, and we need a signal, and we need a receiver. Okay, we need someone who exhibits the expressing the mental state, and we need a receiver who understands that. But too many things are readable. There is too many things which are readable and reliable correlate, because actually readability include that is a reliable correlate, because if it would be random, then it wouldn't be readable, because it couldn't say anything about anything. So too many things. What are the things which are, you already see, drinking very quickly means you are thirsty, and everyone can read it. Everyone see from your way of drinking that you are thirsty. A tiger is drinking can be read as this tiger is not dangerous. No, he's utterly thirsty. He won't eat me up. Good. So sweating from heat means being hot. Readable, but it's not an expression of being hot. So we need something more. And that is a bit more tricky what we need. What we need is something that the subject has to be aware that he is making it manifest that he has a mental state, that he is in a mental state. So to put it more precisely, a mental state is manifest in a behavior when there is possibility that the subject is aware of the fact that she is exhibiting a certain behavior B, and behavior B reveals her own mental state. And very interestingly, that presupposes readability. And remember, readability was presupposing correlation, reliable correlation. So we are building kind of something. And if that is correct, if that manifest is correct, and just one more thing, it's very important that it's a possibility. So it's not like that you are always aware of your mental, because when you have a natural smile, sometimes you know about it, sometimes you just don't know about it. So it's just a possibility, at least in some cases, you have to be aware of it, that your behavior reveals your mental state. So this allows revealing the mental state voluntarily or intentionally if you choose to do it, and it also allows to control or produce the behavior. So recall intentional sign. So you have to understand it's very, very difficult, because we have to have something like, we have to understand natural smile and intentional smile together. So it's not an easy thing. Okay. Again, we have counterexamples. We have counterexamples like blushing. One can be aware of oneself blushing and revealing his or her embarrassment or shame. And we have counterexamples, shivering from cold. One can be aware of revealing one's sensory state. Everyone will know that you are cold when you are shivering. No way out of that. So you cannot even cover, like you can cover when you are blushing. If the mental state is not decoupled or in some sense independent from the behavior, then it cannot be revealing in the relevant sense, like shivering from cold. So you might say in some minimal sense, of course, shivering reveals that you are cold, but it's not the interesting sense. That we don't need a new category for that. That is behavioral reading. I can see that you are thirsty. I can see you are cold. You are not expressing it. Your behavior just gives you up. We just see it all. So we need something else. We need something on the receiver side which we didn't get yet. So is the receiver addressed in some minimal way? To be audience sensitive will be the answer. And what audience sensitivity means? It means that whenever you have an expressive behavior, the expressive behavior has to occur much more often when the audience is there relative to when the audience is absent. So you are happy a lot of time. I hope even in pandemic you're able to do it. You are happy. You are Italian. You are happy. Come on. So you are happy all of the time. But you don't reveal it always. You are not smiling constantly. You smile much more when the audience is present. I am saying it. Is it true? Is it not? Yes, it is. So there are extremely many things supporting it. For example, Friedland, 1991. Natural smile occur more when audience is present. Probably that is the problem with the pandemic. People are not there, we cannot smile. That's the problem that we have to solve. That is Zoom. So, or you have something else. So, test the audience sensitivity hypothesis. We have blushing. It is reliably correlated with shame. It is readable. It is manifest. You can be aware of that you are blushing. That is why you are covering your head when you are blushing. But if blushing is audience sensitive, then it is an expression. Let's see another question case. Sweating from anxiety looks not good, but it is a reliable correlate with anxiety. It's readable. It seems it's manifest anxiety. You can be aware that you are giving away your anxiety with sweating. That's all right. The question is it audience sensitive? Do you sweat more when someone is there from anxiety compared to when you have anxiety and no one is there? Scientific question that has to be answered. And it's very easy, testable hypothesis. Actually, it could be that it's a bit more, but not significantly more. We need significantly more. So let's see, natural smile, intentional smile, crying, fearful face, anger, and so on. All rely on reliable correlation. When you have a smile, then you are happy. When you cry, you are sad. When you have a fearful face, you are afraid. When you have an angry face, you are angry. This so that reliable correlation and this distinctive design makes them readable. They are such that they are just very quickly recognizable. Actually, smile is really quickly recognizable, never mixed up. They are such that they manifest. The subject is aware that he, or could be aware that she has a natural smile, always aware when she has an intentional smile. Crying, typically, we are aware of. Actually, it's possible of crying with someone is somehow not totally aware, but it's more likely you are aware of it. A first fearful face, you are not aware. Actually, I have a picture about me when I was walking on a cliff and I thought, oh, I am not afraid. And when you look at the picture, I was terribly afraid, like absolutely afraid. From the picture, you can see. So it is that the money is possible. It's possible to be aware of that you are afraid, you are sad, and you are giving it up in an expressive behavior. So that's very interesting, very nice. But what is it for? Why on earth we have that? Why should we have that? We suggest that facial expression is for affective attunement. And that is very interesting because if that's the case, if it's for affective attunement, then it's very clear why we have to have the manifestation. So if it's affective attunement, I have to be able to control it sometimes at least, and I have to be able to voluntarily initiate it, intentionally do it. Probably the same behavior which wasn't intentional first, which is the case with the natural smile and the Dusan smile. What are the reasons why we think it's attunement? So interestingly, look at the first picture, you will say smile, and you are kind of right, because it's called silent bare teeth display, typically a signal of submission for capuchin monkeys, but babies actually use it for affiliative function. So babies use it for kind of affect, positive affect, and bonding, and kind of trying to make a group. I mean, you are in, we are together. Only babies, they stop to use it. Only humans use it when they are not babies. So I wouldn't say that the silent teeth display is the same as smile. It has some function which is overlapping, but it's not exactly the same. It's not exactly joy, because it typically actually in an adult means submission. So interestingly, both the human and the non-human primate expression is based on the same reliable correlation with the internal state, readability. Actually, even dogs can read human emotions and anything which was brought up by humans. And interestingly, if you think about the capuchin monkey case, there is an interesting thing. Capuchin monkeys smile, and there is a reciprocity. When one smiles, the other, the receiver, toward which the smile is directed at, will give a smile back. That's very interesting. It's not automatic. It's not like smile, smile. No, it's not like that. Smile, the reciprocation smile can be very delayed, can be even denied, and it's very, very, very flexible. It depends on many, many factors. So it looks like if it depends on different factors, then there is some kind of control. The capuchin monkey not just giving back the smile, smile, smile. No, it's not like that. It's like he can decide, do I smile back? Not obviously not that way, but it's very important that you have inhibition. You can not you obviously, because you are not capuchin monkey, but capuchin monkey can have inhibition. He cannot give it, he can give it much later, and so on and so on. So it looks like it's kind of already an emotional tuning, and one might be not so keen on being tuned. So because we have that control and such, they have to be somehow aware of it because in order to control, there has to be some kind of access to it. So manifestation already with our primate relatives is acquired. So it's very good. And interestingly, the second reason why we think that our view is quite good is that the stages we considered match. It was, I just said a priori the stages, but actually the evolution of expression as conceived by Graziano take that as stages until from some kind of natural behavior which is readable, like you can read that someone is thirsty, slowly it evolved with small steps toward an expressive behavior. So the idea is that the functions seem to be that facial expressions are for affective attunement. And then you say, okay, but animals are not cooperative. You don't need cooperation for that, because actually effective attunement is not for cooperation, but only for coordination. You need coordination for fight, and animals love to fight, but the fight has to end. You are in a big fight, how to end? Oh, yawn one. So actually yawning is a way to end the fight. You can try if you have a problem. So yawning is a way to end the fight, but yawning is just coordination of the conflict, okay? So we don't need that we have to think about cooperation, because they don't have primate relatives, so forth, they cannot cooperate, only we can. So we suggest the following. Expression is an audience-sensitive manifestation of one's own mind for coordination. And that's it. That's the take-home message. But we are not ready yet. Oh, Julia.
Okay, that's better. Okay, let me say a few words now about how our account relates to other existing ones, other major accounts of expression. And first, we want to compare our account to the one proposed by Mitchell Green in his 2007 book, Self-Expression. It's one of the most comprehensive studies of the phenomenon of expression. It's a beautiful book, so I recommend it to you if you're interested in expressive phenomena. And so two major claims of his account are, one, that an expression is a signal that shows something, and this idea of showing in Green is glossed in terms of a contrast with representing. He also says it's a kind of embodiment of content rather than a representation. And second, a crucial claim in his account is that an expression is a signal that is designed either intentionally or through natural selection to show the information that it does. So the idea of design is central to Green's account of expression. Now contrast that with our account. Our view is that the criteria of expression that we worked out, namely reliable correlation, manifestation, readability, and audience sensitivity, may be fulfilled without design being present, either intentional design or natural selection. So we want to focus on the functionality of the phenomena, and we believe that the functionality can be given without there actually being design for the purpose of that function. Okay, next slide. And of course, one of the most important and influential accounts of expression has been given by Charles Darwin in this influential book, The Expression of the Emotions in Man and Animals. And it's quite interesting to consider that on Darwin's account, expressive behavior is actually not directly selected for on account of its expressivity or communicative function. Instead, Darwin believes that most of the expressive behavior that we find in humans and animals are actually vestiges of behavior that is serviceable to the individual organism in some sense with regard to its well-being and survival. And one can contrast that with other evolutionary psychologists, such as, Paul Ekman, who was seen in the first picture with the natural and the intentional smile. So he thinks that at least some facial expressions were actually selected for on account of their expressivity or their communicative function. So that's a non-Darwinian view. But it's compatible with Darwin's account that at least some expressive behavior can be understood as an acceptation, meaning that it is a behavior that has come to serve a different function, namely the expressive function, than the one it has originally evolved for. And we think that this idea, this Darwinian idea, is congenial to our account. So in some sense, you might say that our account is a neo-Darwinian account, because we want to stay silent on the selective mechanism that leads to the development of these expressive behaviors. And instead, we want to focus on their functionality, which we believe is captured adequately by our criteria. And as I said earlier, this functionality can occur without there being either intentional design or design through natural selection. And we think that it's an advantage of our account to focus on the functionality rather than on design, because it gives us a more liberal account that in fact allows for individualistic forms of expression. So for instance, if you think back about the case of sweating from anxiety, it is in fact conceivable on our account that this might turn out to be a case of expression, given that the criteria, the functionality criteria for expression are fulfilled. But this doesn't have to generalize over a whole group of individuals of the same species. It can be very individual. As long as the functionality is given, we want to say that this is a case of expression. Okay, next slide. And finally, we want to come back to Richard Wollheim once more and his account. Hong Yu already discussed him in some more detail. So on Wollheim's account, as we saw, expressive behavior is always intentionally designed. More specifically, in Wollheim's view, expressive behavior consists in intentional action aimed at bringing about physiognomic correspondence between the content of the inner state and the bodily behavior. So his view is that what we need for expression is some kind of physiognomic correspondence, but we don't get the right account or the right kind of physiognomic correspondence unless we also introduce intentionality. Now, of course, again, our account differs from that because we think that neither intentional design nor design through natural selection is essential for expression. And we also believe that that's a virtue of our account because it can easily capture both the intentional and the natural smile and other forms of natural expression.
So let's bring all this together. We've characterized the idea of expression as audience sensitive manifestation of a subject's mind for other subjects. What is this character of this expressive state? Now, if we look at the cases that we've discussed, the central cases of expressions that we've discussed, like smiling, crying, and so on, are expressions of affective states and emotions, okay? And here, an interesting observation to make is that the functional role of affect is not only to manage our internal cognitive economy, but it also has an outer face, namely for negotiating with other subjects, other people, through expression, so that others can understand the mental states that you are in, and you can understand the mental states that they are in, so that you can negotiate whatever you're trying to do together or not trying to do together. So expression is, in its central instances, an effective kind of form of mindedness. Now, if expression is audience-sensitive manifestation of one's mind, it is an intersubjective and social phenomenon as well, because it's audience-sensitive, okay? And it's a kind of manifestation which is for others and modulated by the presence of other subjects. Therefore, we can say that insofar as expression is a basic form of mindedness, then our minds are inherently social. Now, to bring everything to a close, what we've argued today is that expression is a basic form of mindedness that is a kind of audience-sensitive manifestation of one's own mind. And the interest in this phenomena lies in its giving us a very different picture of mind, not just simply as an input or output mechanism, but as a distinctive, affective, and social kind of system that is sensitive to one's own states in a way that reveals this for other creatures of the same kind as one and other creatures that one interacts with in such a way that intersubjective and social interaction is possible. And with that, we thank you.
Okay, very well. So let's see.